The Nationals have made some changes to their coaching staff, but the two most prominent names in that discussion is Darnell Coles and Jim Hickey. And let's just say this, they are both still in Washington, D.C., and I got some thoughts.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you guys for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11, as well as the show page at LO_Nationals, and get your latest Nationals news and notes. And of course, Everydayers out there, you know it, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day, as I've taken my passion for this Nationals team into talking form with the Locked On Podcast Network, where again, it's your team every single day. And later on in today's show, we will be talking Jordan Weems in the 2023 breakdown of him, as he had kind of a breakout season this year. And I think he will have a prominent role in this organization in the back end of the bullpen going forward. But let's talk about Jordan Weems later on and really what he means to this back end of the bullpen. Also, the Nationals have made some coaching staff changes. I'll tell you about those later on as well. But first and foremost, let's get into the two decisions that did not happen. And a lot of people were kind of expecting this, I think, or a lot of people would have anticipated the Nationals moving on from at least Jim Hickey, the Nationals pitching coach, or Darnell Coles, the Nationals hitting coach. Jim Hickey, the pitching coach, Darnell Coles, the hitting coach. Let's set that aside there real quick. But the Nationals, after making a ton of changes, Tim Bogar, the bench coach, he's out. Well, Jim Hickey and Darnell Coles, they are here to stay, at least for right now. Andrew Golden of the Washington Post reported today that Darnell Coles will be staying with the organization as of right now. And Britt Giroli of The Athletic reported that Jim Hickey will be staying on with the Washington Nationals going forward as well. So here's the thing. This is a tough situation, if we're just being honest here. And I don't think it's as easy of a decision as some may think. But let me tell you what I really kind of think about this, my opinion on it. And it's not great, I will be honest. Now, if you were to tell me that Jim Hickey and Darnell Coles would have been let go, I would have said, well, first and foremost, that sucks. I never root for anyone to lose their job. But second, I think it would have been a good decision. And the reason why I say that is from my just baseball opinion, and the way that I think and the way that I evaluate players, I think is much different than the way that Darnell Coles and Jim Hickey evaluate players. I come from the age of math. I like numbers. I like the analytics, and I like the deep dive statistics on these different guys. You've seen organizations just thrive in that environment. The Nationals have always kind of been behind the eight ball in that situation. And Jim Hickey and Darnell Coles, while they've been fine, in my opinion, they aren't those guys. They are not the analytical kind of guys who will say, well, in this situation, he will throw this pitch 98% of the time. Whatever it is, whatever stat that you want to go, that is my base opinion just right then and there. But looking beyond that stuff, though, were the failures of the pitching staff and this Nationals offense, is it on Jim Hickey and Darnell Coles? Because I think there's a case-by-case basis when you're talking about both those things. Let's start off with Darnell Coles, the Nationals hitting coach, who will be returning again. How sure are we that this was Darnell Coles' fault? We know the numbers were not there. The Nationals, with runners in scoring position, were not very good. The Nationals, basically in every statistical category that matters to you, whether it be slugging, on base, whatever it is, the Nationals were basically in the back end of all of those statistics. One of the worst offensive teams in all of baseball this year. And yes, it falls on coaching. It does. But then also, if you kind of just take a step back and look at it from this side, how much talent do the Nationals have, especially on offense? Because when you're considering the fact that, number one, is this team really supposed to be hitting at the rate that they were? Because if I remember correctly, going into this season, it was all about the development. And if you were to look around offensively, Lane Thomas, while he did kind of fall asleep towards the second half of the season and kind of fell into that slump, Lane Thomas developed. He was a good hitter. And yes, again, he wasn't as consistent as he was in that first half, really 3/4 of the season. He fell off a little bit. C.J. Abrams, first half started off slow. Second half, we all know what happened, was one of the hottest hitters on this national team and one of the hottest hitters in the National League East as well at one point. Looking around the diamond as well, other guys, Luis Garcia, not all that great. Dominic Smith, not all that great. Alex Call, who's in center field a lot. Jacob Young, not all that great offensively. There are a lot of different things. And Keibert Ruiz, switch hitting catcher, stayed healthy all year. Solid season. You saw the improvement there. Riley Adams, for a portion of the season, was one of the Nationals' better hitters, just didn't really get that many opportunities. Jeimer Candelario had that bounce back year over at third base. So I think the question that I'm getting at to here with Darnell Coles, that where I'm like, should he have been brought back or should he have been given another chance? Well, I don't really blame Darnell Coles for all those faults there. Because if you were to look around individually, the guys who are going to be on this team moving forward, C.J. Abrams, Keibert Ruiz, Lane Thomas, all three of those guys this year improve. And most importantly, C.J. Abrams, Keibert Ruiz, the two young phenom kind of prospects the Nationals got at the trade deadline each of the last 2 years. These are guys who did step up, and which they really needed them to step up, oh, by the way. So going at this, in this situation, I'm not necessarily saying that it's the chef that is cooking up this meal that just simply isn't that good. I think it's more so the fact that the ingredients that we are really cooking with right now isn't really doing its justice. And meaning what I say by that, this lineup just isn't that good. It's just not filled with the talent that you could say, I can give this guy a straight up evaluation and say, he ain't that good. And yes, the Nationals offense hasn't been good, and a lot of that falls on Darnell Coles, and I totally can't admit that. But also kind of balancing and spinning both plates here, you can say that the offensive production was also just simply because of the fact that we lack talent. We do. And Joey Meneses, while he was good this year, he really did take a step back as a whole, also considering his and what he didn't do this year, which is hit for power. Dominic Smith was kind of what he has been over the last few years. Reason number one as to why he was DFA'd by the New York Mets is because he couldn't hit. This team lacks a lot of different things here. Number one, it's coaching, which I agree with. Number two, it's the fact that we don't really have the ingredients in my mind to make this good meal. And I'm not saying Darnell Coles should have been brought back, because in fact, I can say this. I don't align analytically with that coaching staff. I don't see it eye to eye with them. I would have much different approaches with things, and I would switch up a lot of different things with this Nationals team that we will get into later on in this offseason. But I also don't think it's all on them as to why this Nationals team was a bad offensive squad. Remember, we were supposed to win around 58 games this year. That's what a lot of different sportsbooks heads and a lot of different executives around the league who pitch into that, who write all these articles, all the national insiders who write about these teams and the projections. They speak to GMs in baseball. This was not a good team. The Nationals overall, while you can look at the offense and the pitching production, yeah, it wasn't all that great, but still this team found a way to win a lot more games than what people thought. So now let's get into Jim Hickey, and honestly, he kind of falls in the same conversation as this. And again, with Jim Hickey, I can say this. I definitely do not align with what he sees. I like the analytics, again, similar to with the offensive production. But if you were to consider this, number one, I do not put Trevor Williams and kind of the faulty way that he pitched this year on Jim Hickey. Because if you were to look at the numbers from years past, when Trevor Williams is an everyday starter taking the ball every 5 to 6 days, he was never that productive. So the fact that the pitching, and if you were to go down the line, Josiah Gray, he was very good this year, improved to be an all-star. Is that all on Jim Hickey? Who knows? But the fact is, he was the pitching coach in that stretch. But also, Josiah Gray had that rough stretch in August. Is that also on Jim Hickey? If he's going to get the praise for his success, he's also going to get the reign of his downfall, which he did. But then also on the other hand, looking around at all the other pitchers on this staff, the bullpen, the starting pitching, you can still make the argument that from 2022 to 2023, these pitching staffs, both the bullpen and the starting rotation, improved drastically. Now, I'm not here to say that this is because of the coaching of Jim Hickey. I'm not saying the offensive production was a little bit better because of the construction of Darnell Coles. I'm not saying that. I don't think that's the case here. But I also think it's a little unfair to look at both of them and say, well, the Nationals, they didn't produce this year in this, and that. That is why they should be let go. They didn't have a slugging number up to an MLB average. This is why they should be let go. Their bullpen ERA was one of the worst in all of baseball. Jim Hickey should be let go. I think it's a little more deeper than that. And the fact that the Nationals, we just have to take it for what it is. The talent that we have is not postseason caliber at this moment in time, meaning the 2023 Nationals. We have bits and pieces of it that I can see with Josiah Gray, Mackenzie Gore, Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey, all those different guys, CJ Abrams, Keibert Ruiz, both categories here, spinning both plates. You can talk about all those different things and what they do for this organization. But also at the other end of it, how much does this really downfall, or whatever you want to say, with both the offensive and pitching production falls on the coaches? Because they can't just miraculously whip up offense in pitching production. Because matter of fact, I mean, the starting pitching, while again, the numbers are not that good. Mackenzie Gore was solid. Josiah Gray was solid. Jake Irvin was solid. Patrick Corbin was better than being the worst pitcher in all of baseball, which he has been over the last few years. Trevor Williams was all not that good, but if you look back at his recent starts, meaning from years past when he was a full-time starter back with the Pittsburgh Pirates and as well as the Cubs, it wasn't that bad. It just wasn't. Because these are the expectations for the guys that we have. When you buy cheap, when you go to Marshall's or whatever clearance rack that you shop at, you expect what you pay for. And this is what the Nationals have done. So let me just end it by this. Darnell Coles and Jim Hickey, if it were up to me, I would move on from them. But I also understand the fact that the Nationals, you can make an argument as to why they shouldn't be because of the individual performances of the young guys and the real building blocks of this organization. Now, again, I understand the numbers of it. I understand really the principle of keeping those two guys. We want to see changes because, yes, coaching will always fall on the sword before players do. And in this situation, I think the Nationals are kind of siding with the coaches on this one. In which, again, I think if the Nationals were to hire Daniel Murphy, former Washington Nationals, second baseman here, to be the hitting coach, which I would do, by the way, in a heartbeat. But if they were to do that and going into next year, I would not expect some crazy jump of offensive production due to the coaching of Daniel Murphy. Or name that sexy pitching coach hire that is a young analytical mind. I think it would help. And I would certainly think Daniel Murphy would help as a hitting coach. But then I also don't think that that coaching would translate into 15 more wins down the line for this team. I just don't really see that that's the case. More side of it is player development and what we do on that side, in which the Nationals have made moves all offseason long regarding that. And Jim Hickey and Darnell Coles, they certainly have their ways in for player development, and they have their ways as to what they do, as to what they believe in. And it's certainly not analytics, but even then, you can't really make the argument when they go to GM Mike Rizzo and David Martinez and they're trying to make a case for them to save their job. I guarantee you they're probably saying, look, you gave me this product in which was expected to be a very bad production this year, and it wasn't. So I also think that is what they came to David Martinez and as well as GM Mike Rizzo and made their case for it. And honestly, I understand it. But again, me, Ryan Clary, general manager of the Washington Nationals, if I ever were to be one day, which I will never be, I would move on from both of them. But I understand as to why they don't. because it really wasn't as bad as it could have been this year. Thank you guys for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day. Before we move on and discuss other coaching staff changes, let me tell you guys about our friends over at Jase Medical. And guys, Jase Medical is the best because we want to tell you why modern medical care and treatment are important, but our global supply chains are fragile. Things like pandemics, natural disasters, and foreign travel may cut you off from the treatment you need. Jase Medical is your solution. Just fill out their online form, and one of Jase Medical's board-certified physicians will review it to determine whether medications are safe and appropriate. Then Jase will send your prescriptions to one of their partner pharmacies where your order will be filled and mailed directly to your home. You can also send your physician a message for answers to treatment-related questions anytime. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics by Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Thank you guys for making Locked On Nats your first listen. And of course, the Nationals have made some coaching staff changes, as this has been the theme of the offseason. So let's get into it. Bench coach Tim Bogar, third base coach Gary DiSarcina, and assistant hitting coach Pat Rossler. All of those guys will be gone, and as well as first base coach Eric Young Jr., a fan favorite, personally one of my favorites as well. I will miss seeing his Jordans over at first base. But beyond all those moves, listen, I saw someone say this the other day, and I believe it was Stephen Newman. Follow him over on Twitter. Good follow, good Nationals fan, always in it. Love his follow. But I believe he retweeted someone out there that said Tim Bogar is a potential managerial case. And he could be, because this is kind of the one that where I was a little, not frustrated by, but I was a little questioning. It made me pivot in my brain about what I thought about Tim Bogar, because I've always kind of liked the fact that Tim Bogar is, number one, he's been around baseball for a while, a good baseball man in general. And so when you have someone like that who has been on postseason teams, who has head at the clubhouse in a lot of different situations and a lot of past teams as well, yeah, that stuff kind of stinks. And in fact, it wasn't all that great, in my opinion. But beyond all this, one thing stands true here. The Nationals are clearly trying to change something up. And I think with all these different moves, with third base coach Gary DiSarcina and first base coach Eric Young Jr., I think both these moves are relatively surprising. Now, let's start off with Gary DiSarcina at first, or over at third base, but we're going to start him off first. Gary DiSarcina, I have no issue with this, because if you remember, we've seen a lot of base running blunders so far this year. And really, while Bob Senley, he wasn't all the best at third base, he wasn't really the best first base coach as well, at least he had some aggression. Gary DiSarcina at times this year didn't really know when to send guys at home to make tight plays. And a lot of these things over 162 games, they're going to pile up for many different reasons. Number one, when you play every single day, you're going to find a lot of positives, but also a lot of negatives. It doesn't matter what team you play on. It doesn't matter what you do. There's positives and there's negatives for both when you have that big of a sample size. But I've kind of seen it with DiSarcina in this Nationals team. A lot of different times you would see guys like Lane Thomas being held up over at third base, in which him and his speed, and really that's what separates him from the pack. You could have all that momentum going by just sending someone home. And I think a lot of people just overthink the fact that third base coaches and really first base coaches, they have to know their runners. They have to know who's coming around and making that turn going over to second base, or whether it be going home. And yes, that's the obvious there. They have to know it. They have to know the situation and really just understand baseball as a whole. But when you're talking about those two guys in particular, this year we saw a lot of really just bad base running as a whole. And Eric Young Jr., I believe, was at the head of that operation. And we saw sloppy base running a lot of different times this season. Whether it be Keibert Ruiz getting picked off over at first base, Victor Robles, someone who has struggled immensely running the bases his entire career. We saw it even in portions and pockets of this game, you saw a lot of different errors in that neck of the woods. So when you're talking about these two guys in particular, I understand why the Nationals decided to move on. Number one, the aggression was an issue with me. The fact that the lack of aggression thereof, not enough aggression, because I think a big part of base running and really what is different in baseball is that you can make teams make errors, meaning you can have guys, you can have them run in and outs, but you can also have them create runs. In a lot of different areas, when you have speedy guys, whether it be C.J. Abrams, Lane Thomas, Alex Call, or whoever it is out there, the Nationals, they can kind of push the pedal to the metal and really just make teams make mistakes, in which the Nationals did not really do all that often this year. They're very conservative, and when they weren't conservative, it just wasn't that good. There wasn't that good of a product. And when you talk about the base running, we all know David Aldridge, I remember back from The Athletic a few weeks ago, said, oh my God, he tweeted this out. He said, oh my God, this Nationals base running and really what they haven't done all year has been a disaster. And yes, David, it was a disaster for the Washington Nationals when it came to base running. So I think those two guys in particular, that is why they moved on from them. I just wanted to talk about Mackenzie Gore today, man. But the Nationals, they made some coaching changes, and here we are today. So Mackenzie Gore, he will get his 2023 season breakdown tomorrow. But with that said now, Jordan Weems will be getting a 2023 season breakdown. And honestly, I'm happy for it because Jordan Weems, this guy was really good this year. Drafted as a catcher, spent almost a decade down in the minor leagues. And all of a sudden, Jordan Weems became a viable, good option out of this bullpen. How did we get here with this? Because honestly, truly, I think the Nationals may have found something with Jordan Weems. Let's talk about that. But before we get into it, let me tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. And guys, October baseball is back, and you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to create your new account. They can get in on the action from the first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. And if you don't want to wait the whole game to get a W, predict what will happen in the next at bat with quick bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Jordan Weems, step up to the podium. It is your turn for a 2023 season breakdown. And Jordan Weems this year, while the numbers and really everything that he did this year was, in my opinion, just very good. I think when I talked about Jordan Weems a lot on this show, number one, when you saw him last year, there was a lot of different things to discuss here. Number one, when Jordan Weems threw his fastball last year, and really his slider as well, they got rocked around. In 2022, he had a .547 slug against his fastball, an expected batting average of a .237 in his fastball as well in 2022. Now, looking at his fastball in 2023, not much improvement there. Still a .523 slug, which is pretty damn high. But here's one thing that I think we can take from Jordan Weems this year. His secondary pitches improved drastically, in my opinion. Number one, that starts with his slider. His slider that he threw 43% of his time after last year throwing a fastball 60% of the time, throwing his slider 43% of the time this year, which batters only hit 200 against, with a .323 slug and an expecting batting average of .212. All those underlying numbers kind of tell me this. Jordan Weems' stuff as a whole is only getting better. And I think when you talk about him, in particular with this situation, getting drafted as a catcher, Jordan Weems was not a major league pitcher. He was not drafted to be a major league pitcher. No one really expected him to be a pitcher in the majors, considering you're drafted as a catcher. You've seen it time and time again. A lot of these things, sometimes they don't really work out, like Donovan Casey down with the Nationals. If you remember, he was back traded from that Max Scherzer, Trey Turner deal. I think they're going to give him a shot as a pitcher, maybe. Who knows? But Jordan Weems has been a success story in that department. And when you talk about this bullpen, we all know the struggles that it had last year. It was a disaster. And early on this season, it was also a complete disaster. But I think as this season got on, there were a couple of mainstays that really just stood out. There was Hunter Harvey, Kyle Finnegan, and then Jordan Weems. And a lot of people expected, including myself, that would be Mason Thompson. But no, it was Jordan Weems. This was one of the guys that you could rely on coming out of the bullpen and really understand that the Nationals will be okay. There are also a couple different guys in there as well, Robert Garcia and a handful of others as well that we'll break down at a later date. But I think Jordan Weems, and really what we saw this year, is number one for someone who hasn't been pitching for over 5+ years now. And all of a sudden, he gets to the major leagues last year with the Nationals. Didn't look all that good, but even then, there were some pockets of good stuff. But this year, taking that next step, being a major league pitcher, being someone that Davey Martinez and Jim Hickey could rely on out of the bullpen, Jordan Weems took that next step up. And number one, he's going to be in that opening day rotation come 2024. And I'm not just talking starting pitching. He's not a starting pitcher, but I'm talking bullpen. This is going to be someone who's going to be joining Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey, Tanner Rainey, Robert Garcia, all the other mainstays throughout this season outside of Tanner Rainey. Those guys right there, that is going to be your core of your bullpen. Jose Frere is in that indication as well. Jordan Weems, now I can say this all day long. I just liked what I saw from him this year. And I also liked his pitch recognition, because last year he threw a fastball well over 60% of the time, in which nowadays, if you're throwing your fastball out of the bullpen well over 60% of the time, it better be useful like Sean Doolittle back in the day. And it better not be thrown for strikes either. You better have pinpoint accuracy and not miss the zone. Well, Jordan Weems, the fastball wasn't all that good, but he recognized that. He made that difference and now started to use his slider more, which seemed to be very effective, as we've seen with the underlying numbers, because players weren't able to hit that. And let alone, they also weren't able to get on base on that as well. So when you talk about Jordan Weems, there's a lot of different things to consider here. Number one, is this just kind of a fluky kind of season for Jordan Weems? Or on the flip side of it, is this just someone who's going to be ascending and really just getting into his zone as a pitcher? And I think it's the latter. I think Jordan Weems is going to be that kind of guy that we can rely on going forward. Now, again, I don't think he's going to be an 8th inning setup guy. I think that role is kind of reserved for Hunter Harvey and as well as Tanner Rainey maybe down the line. But I think Jordan Weems is going to be someone that, let's say it's 2-1. Josiah Gray's out there. His pitch count is getting up in the upper 90s. 2-1, 6th inning, going against the Atlanta Braves. You need someone to come in and be a fireman. I think that is the kind of role that Jordan Weems could play here with the Nationals moving forward. And that's just not the most valuable role ever. Some people may say, well, you could find that. You can find that within your farm system. You can sign that guy. You can have Trevor Williams be that guy, whatever it is. But that's still a move that this Nationals team has to make in order to be a contender. This is what the Nationals have to do, in fact. You have to have more success stories coming out of the bullpen, in which when a time at right now, this bullpen ain't very good. And at this moment, while you do have some prospects who are intriguing, you have Zach Brixey, who probably would have been up in the majors at some point this year, had Tommy John surgery earlier this year, shut down for the entire season. Also a lot of different injuries as well. The Matt Cronin, another left-handed pitcher. There's a lot of different injuries that happened with this bullpen this season. Tanner Rainey missing the entire season besides the last series in Atlanta. There were a lot of different things that went wrong for this bullpen in 2023. But Jordan Weems was not one of them. He was the success story of this team, outside of the fact that Kyle Finnegan was one of the better closers in all of baseball throughout the summer. So going forward, Jordan Weems, this is going to be a guy. This is going to be a thing, in my opinion. Because number one, as we said, is this kind of like a fluky good year? Or is his fielding independent pitching, is it higher than what it is his ERA? Sure. But also, I think this is going to be a guy that we can rely on. And number two, he's going to get better because of simple as this. It's the lack of really just production as a whole from Jordan Weems down in the minor leagues. And as well as down last year, something just clicked for him. I don't know what that is, but I think really using his slider and utilizing that and having it be one of his better pitches. In fact, it was his best pitch throughout the season. I think finding that also kind of just helped Jordan Weems solidify himself here in Washington, D.C. And that is why he's going to be a very big-time contender for this bullpen going forward. Postseason baseball is here. You guys can catch postseason baseball over on SiriusXM and the SXM app. But how about those Philadelphia Phillies choking against the Atlanta Braves last night? I ain't rooting for any of those teams, but I've been watching. That was fun. That was a fun game last night. So we'll keep an eye on the postseason. If there's any former Nationals doing good things, we'll discuss it. We'll be upset. We'll be sad. We'll cry together. But as of right now, so good, I think. But hopefully the Phillies don't make the playoffs, or not the playoffs, don't make the World Series, and that'll be that. Of course, Nationals, not in the postseason, but hopefully this time next year, we can be counting on this team, and maybe Jordan Weems getting some big outs in the postseason come this time in 2024. We'll just have to see. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Have a good one.